Hi, my name is Aaron, this is my show Reeducation, and today we're going to be continuing my How Does Anarcho-Communism Work series. And specifically today we're going to be talking about law and order. Not the show, the concept. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So I'm a right-wing libertarian, and I believe that the rights and freedoms of every individual should be at the highest of importance, so long as it doesn't interfere with the rights and freedoms of anybody else. Basically, as long as I'm not hurting anyone, I should be allowed to do whatever I want. Also, even though I do think the government should be very limited and made very small, I also believe the Constitution of the United States defends the individual and most libertarian values. So basically, I believe in American freedom, with law and order. And I bet that'll trigger a lot of your commie pals. But what do you think about that? And how do you propose that you make laws in your anarchist society? Well, aside from law and order basically being turned into a buzzword nowadays, I actually agree with some of the things you're saying. I think that people should have the right to freedom, liberty, fraternity, and democracy, which are all important aspects of the Constitution. And we should fight not only now, but always to ensure that we're able to gain and maintain those rights. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, after all. But as for freedom and rules triggering any of my, quote, commie pals, I don't really think you have to worry about that. Being civil with one another is an ancient concept, after all, and honestly, who doesn't love freedom? Let's look a little further back in history. For any society to function, we have always had some sort of agreement among people. Often, this agreement throughout history has been unwritten, and people acted and interacted with each other with very little structure. But over time, we've built the necessities to interact with each other in extremely intricate ways. From this, we've created a system of laws and rules that have evolved over time. But unfortunately, these rules and laws are subject to our human superstition, flaws in our understanding of human behavior over time, general confusion about how to deal with problems in society, and, they have also been made by the ruling class for an outrageously long period of time. So the rules and laws reflect their values and beliefs, not yours. And if you don't follow their rules, they can lock you in a cage forever, or just kill you. And honestly, this is backwards and archaic. In a modern society, there should be no separate class that makes the rules. It should be something that we all do. We need to look at societal structures scientifically. We need a new way to think about rules and laws today. It's the modern day future, man. And we need our justice system to reflect that. So, as I was talking about before, many anarchists propose free associations and contracts to begin to solve these problems. We discussed before how this could be implemented in the workplace, but let's talk about this on a higher level. Let's talk about this when it's in regards to government. Instead of laws being dictated to us from on high, we can, together as people, create agreements or pacts to make those laws ourselves. Some people call this voluntary association. Most people don't like to even call them laws at all. But just like many of these anarchist words, no matter what you call it, essentially we are trying to create some sort of mutual agreement where we are all civil to one another. This is important because you should have a say in the laws that you agree to live by. Why should you have to listen and obey rules that you had no part in making? And why should you have to follow laws that make sense in one place, but not in another? Like the city versus the country, coastal areas versus the interior. Everybody is going to have different reasons to do different things in different ways, so therefore different laws. We have to look at this holistically, and not just painting everything with a broad brush. Okay, but how do you propose you do that? The people are ignorant and would probably kill themselves without a strict code of laws. Surely we need a big boss like a politician or a president or a judge to make all these rules, right? Law and order. Law and order. Wait, you mean like a king? No, we definitely don't need another king. We're adults. We can handle these sorts of things ourselves. We're not little children. On a day-to-day basis, most people don't need the threat of violence or death to encourage us to do the right thing. Generally, we just don't go around assaulting and robbing random people in the street because most people just really don't want to actually do that. crimes are usually committed for economic reasons. They don't just happen out of nowhere. And not just because some people are inherently evil. Poverty and drug addiction, for example, are a much higher contributor to crime than malicious intent. It's not like the movies where people just get hired on as goons or thugs or hardcore criminals so they can work for the gang and make a bunch of money. It's usually people that are down on their luck, being forced into a position that they had no other choice but to go into. And if we truly work on eliminating poverty, drug addiction, and all of the other factors involved that create crime, then we won't have as many criminals in the first place. And scientifically, laws and incarceration don't even prevent crime, and even in some situations, just create smarter, more violent criminals. Lots of criminals say that going to jail or to some sort of prison is like going to school. That's where they learn the really bad stuff. Obviously, we can work to reduce crime by eliminating the factors that create it. Reducing or eliminating poverty, drug abuse, and homelessness would go a long way. But there are still some people that are going to commit violent crimes. No amount of economic stability is really ever going to stop every single murder, rape, assault, or injustice. Exactly. So we have to lock them up. Lock them up. We gotta be tough on crime. You can't just call a social worker to solve all of these problems. Well, no, you can't just call a social worker to the middle of a crime scene. Obviously, if there's an active murder going on, they're not going to be a whole lot of help. That would be ludicrous. But if people weren't prevented from accessing resources that would benefit their mental health, then a lot of these problems would be resolved before they happen. Obviously, mental illness does not lead someone immediately to becoming a violent criminal. That's just a horrible stereotype. But if we give people access to counseling and therapy and psychiatry and even social workers, then these people will have a lot better chance to work through these very real problems. And honestly, many of us face a lot of these problems on a daily basis. Trauma often leads to further trauma. And when somebody is abused, then they often can turn into an abuser. And even more frightening, because capitalism forces you to always require money to live, many abuse victims are trapped with their abusers with no way to escape without putting themselves or their family in financial jeopardy. Our priorities no longer focus on strengthening the family or healing the individual, but rather always trying to obtain more material wealth for ourselves. We've completely neglected our emotional needs in place of filling that void with consumption. This leaves society with a mass of broken people yearning for real emotional connection, but only ever masking that need by buying more stuff. Again, crime happens for real reasons, and fixing the problems that create those crimes is where we want to focus. And in an anarchist society, if someone actually does commit a violent crime, instead of locking them in a cage like an animal, we'll do the just and humane thing and ask the question of why. We want to find a way to reform or rehabilitate that person so they never make that mistake again. It's the difference between rehabilitative and punitive justice. We would actually look at their individual case and find out the reasons behind the crime and determine if there's some way to fix it. Few people are completely beyond reform, and if it is necessary to temporarily take that person off the streets and put them somewhere where they can't harm anyone, then that's the prerogative of the community. Hang on a second, isn't that just the exact same thing as jail? I thought that you people wanted to abolish prisons. Okay, well, you can call it whatever you like. I'm not going to split hairs on our definitions here. But when I say prison, what I'm talking about is a centralized industry that profits off of the slave labor done by caged human beings. It's not a system created to prevent crime or reform criminals, but rather a way to convince the general population that this form of slavery is somehow agreeable or just. When we say we want to abolish prisons, that's what we're talking about. And we realize that it's a long road. It's going to take a lot of time before we can get rid of violent crime or all crime entirely, and have a society that just exists without it. It may not even be possible, but it is something that we want to always strive for. That should be the goal of every society. And I'm not naive. I realize that some people might be completely unfixable, albeit it's a teeny tiny percentage of the population that's incarcerated right now, but there is still the possibility that once in a while you'll come across an unrepentant murderer or worse. And for those people, yeah, we'll probably have to lock them up. It's not like we can just banish people to Siberia or to the Mojave Desert. If there are still people within society that reject the social order, even after all of the reforms and the systems put in place to help those people, we have to face the reality that they will have to be put away. Us anarchists are a happy, forgiving bunch, and we are willing to help people. But our kindness should not be confused for weakness. We want to create a truly just and free society, but we're never going to extend that freedom to people who wish to rape and murder. Just like you said at the beginning, I believe that we should all have the right and freedom to do basically whatever we want, so long as it doesn't infringe or impose on the rights and freedoms of everybody else. And if you violate someone else's right to live, then you've given the community the right to take away your freedom. It is a cruel reality, and hopefully one day we can come up with a better solution, but as for now, a reality it is. Of course, we would try every other option to prevent this from happening, but as a community, we have to look at our rules and laws in a realistic way. So many anarchists believe that to actually set up functioning and realistic rules in a society, the democratic method must be adhered to. We shouldn't just be electing some politician to make all of the rules for us. We need to be making those rules ourselves. And we can do this through direct democracy, liquid democracy, vote weighing, and ranked choice voting. We can actually work together on determining the rules surrounding social interactions, or economic involvement, and even political decision making. And we can even use the democratic confederalist method to organize these decisions and formulate something of a constitution. Essentially, I'm talking about that societal contract, that voluntary association that we were talking about before. First contracts, now constitutions? This sounds more and more like the United States as it is right now. How is this any different from what we currently have? Well, actually, it's extremely different. For one thing, you're actually making the decisions yourself. Really, we're doing nothing more than upholding the lofty goals and claims that the Constitution set out to achieve in the first place. Obviously, we want to get rid of the parts that continuously destroy our lives, but there are some things that are worth saving. We know so much more now about how to actually organize a society in a realistic way, and working off of a document that's hundreds of years old doesn't make sense. The Constitution even says itself that to secure the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, whenever any form of government becomes too destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute a new government laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form. When a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Clearly, what we have now is not and has not been working for the people for a very long time. It's time to cut off the rot and replace this system with something that actually functions properly. And we can do that not by the threat of a gun, but by the promise of a better future. We can do it through making organizations and agreements with each other. We could make a new constitution. It would be an agreement between all the citizens in the Federation to follow a common set of ideals and beliefs. It outlines basic rules that the people in the Federation can agree on, such as anti-imperialism, anti-slavery, democratic self-organization, autonomy, direct democracy, environmentalism, egalitarianism, multiculturalism, self-defense, and even self-governance. And we would still outline that we want to achieve the lofty goals that we were promised through capitalism during the American Revolution: freedom, security, liberty, democracy, fraternity, These things are incredibly important, and things that we want to fight and defend, all of us together. But we don't have that right now. We don't have anything close to that. We're told that we have the freedom to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. But every single one of those things is put behind a paywall, making them freedoms for the people that can afford it, and not for the ones who can't. They say they provide you with security, but your own personal security is constantly compromised through the Patriot Act, making it legal for the government to spy on you or collect data on you at any time. They say that they provide fraternity and unity, and yet they pit you against your family members based on political disagreements. And they say they give you democracy, but they won't even allow you to exercise that freedom in the place where you spend the most time, your workplace. No, the current system did not provide you with any of those things. But we can work on a new system that can. Just like you, I believe that all people should have the right and freedom to do basically whatever they want, so long as they're not infringing on the rights and freedoms of anybody else. And law and order makes total sense if you agree with the rules and laws that are being proposed. And if you get to take part in making those rules and laws, then there's a much higher probability that you'll follow by them. At least, that's the way I look at it. If you do get a chance, please check out all the links in the description box below. Hit that little bell button because you know that they're not going to tell you when I release a new video, and make sure you're subscribed because they're unsubscribing people every single day. Also check out my merch store and subscribe to me on Patreon. Every single dollar really helps fund this show because no capitalist business is going to help fund this show, and thanks for watching.